Of course, this is just a model, and real-world experiences, including your own, will vary, but we think this basic rationale holds. If you adjust your message philosophy and marketing mix to help learners learn, shoppers shop, and buyers buy, then nurture your leads on their terms, good things will happen, even with smaller budgets. So, how do we create a marketing environment capable of supporting this model? Let's start with a basic conversation. Any conversation has somebody with something to say, someone to say it to, a channel to get the message from sender to receiver, and importantly, a feedback loop. Every conversation works this way, whether the sender and receiver are in the same room at the same time, or they're pen pals, or they're texting, or one's a salesperson and the other is a prospect. It always works the same way. And here's the cool part. Based on the feedback, the sender changes what he says next. Why? Because we're constantly picking up cues on how we're doing. To get our point across, we say more when people nod, and change tactics when they look confused or start falling asleep or start checking their email. So if you're doing that right now, stop. Which brings us to a couple of important points. First, in advertising, it is really hard to listen. Even harder to listen quickly, and really hard to adapt and get the next message out within the buying cycle. Then there's the problem of scalability. How do you carry on hundreds of thousands of conversations going in different directions with different feedback and a seemingly infinite number of endpoints at the same time? Basically, you replace the sender with the computer. Think of it as computer-mediated conversation. To make this work, we stop thinking about tactics and start thinking about a knowledge base that can be leveraged in a variety of tactics as needed. In order to build the knowledge base, we want to create fundamentally a database with a bunch of content bits that represent all of the things we might want to say or show to a prospective customer. We want to break them up into discrete thoughts so we can mix and match as necessary to create just the right message. This is similar to how a computer program works. Programmers create a bunch of code objects that get linked together to do interesting things based on the user's specific need. They call it object-oriented programming, as opposed to the old-school procedural style of writing one long program and trying to skip around it to accomplish things. So, you can think of what we're talking about as object-oriented marketing. Anyway, you also want a collection of business intelligence and message customization rules that you can link to both your content objects and your profile database. Then, using some sort of tailoring engine, you can pull together the right objects based on the recipient's profile data and deliver the message through whatever channel you happen to be making contact in. The more you interact, the smarter the system gets and the more appropriate the message is. It's like having your best salesperson on every call, since the computer can quickly predict the best messages based on what's worked with other recipients who've had similar profiles in the past. Okay, let's see an example. The whole notion of object-oriented marketing is to overcome the traditional database marketing hurdle of matching people to messages. Instead, we want to match messages to people. The example we're going to use is based on creating a fictional banner ad for a fictional company called Cheesetown. We're going to focus on the copywriter's experience because even though visuals create impact, knowledge transfer is still largely copy-driven. Plus, it's easier to see the necessary nuance with a copy-driven example. In traditional development, the writer starts with a blank page, envisions a mythical reader, and then crafts a story. So, everything you enjoy gets better with a wedge of your favorite Cheesetown cheese. Cheesetown means cheesy love for the whole gang. Yes, it's a cheesy example on many levels. In a segmentation approach, the writer fills his blank page with 4 stories based on 4 personas that likely came out of some kind of database analysis, along with client and account team expertise. 4 times the effort, and the copy still doesn't reach the individual. With object-oriented development, we take a different approach. Instead of mythical readers, we look for potential reader attributes, and then craft message chunks for each attribute. When you use the tailoring engine we described earlier, you get the right story for each reader, in real time. For Cheesetown, we're going to focus on 5 variables. Data for these variables could have been already in a database or collected during an interaction. Or the data could be missing. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that we know the variables and their associated values that could potentially be known or gathered. So, we start by writing a generic or default version. Basically the version you'd see if we didn't know anything about you. It's the kind of all things to all people, which means it's not really right for any one individual. Let's fix that. To create copy objects, we start at the top of the paragraph and look for opportunities to enhance things based on the available profile information. For instance, hobby stuff. So, if your favorite hobby is basketball, how about before your next three-pointer, try a wedge of your favorite Cheesetown cheese. Or, nothing says game, set, match like a wedge of your favorite Cheesetown cheese, if you're into tennis. If we don't know the reader's hobby, that's okay. We'll just stick with the default copy. Then, moving down the paragraph, we can make things a lot more meaningful if we know what the reader's favorite cheese is. Everything you enjoy gets better with a glob of Cheesetown Brie. Brie means cheesy love. Or, everything you enjoy gets better with a block of Cheesetown Colby. Colby means cheesy love. So many things mean cheesy love. And again, if we don't know the reader's favorite cheese, we can stick with the default phrase. Here's where things get even more interesting. Within each tailored object, we can look for additional tailoring opportunities. For instance, if we know the reader's favorite cheese accompaniment, we can insert it within each tailored chunk. Say somebody loves Colby and crackers. We'd say, a block of Cheesetown Colby and a sleeve of crackers. If we don't know the reader's favorite cheese side, we can always leave it blank. When we're done, we have enough objects to deliver the right banner ad for Dave and any other potential cheese eater who's not Dave. Based on 76 graphic objects, basically 51 state graphics and 15 hobby graphics, 8 profile points, not counting first name, and 42 sentence fragments, it's possible to create over 1.7 million unique banner ads. Of course, if you're Dave, and I am, there's only one right ad. This is the power of object-oriented marketing. It's possible to create a nearly infinite number of experiences for our visitors without creating enough web pages to try and be all things to all people. We can simply be the right thing at the right time for each visitor. Or we can stick with the default version and hope it appeals to enough people to make our numbers. This is a very simple, non-creative execution, but I think it illustrates a process that is not only doable, but the direction in which all effective customer-centric marketing is headed. It's easy when we talk about object-oriented marketing to see it as personalization or Mad Libs, where we're just inserting profile data elements into otherwise generic copy, or just swapping out photos to match a particular demographic. But we're really talking about fundamentally rethinking what we have to say about our brand, so we can coherently pull together the right messages and spin them in a meaningful way based on the moving targets known as prospects and customers. To make this work, we need to be both relevant and intimate. Let's start with relevance. This is tailoring that's focused on the content, what we have to say about our brand or our product. Most products have plenty of content, but for any single prospect, most of it is extraneous to their current and particular needs. When creating marketing objects for relevance, it's important to break the content down so it can be easily filtered to weed out things that won't matter for the individual, so we can spend all of our contact time on the topics that do matter. Here's a quick example of what we mean. We built a site for Tylenol PM called iSlumber. Feel free to check it out at islumber.com. Or, if you're into woodworking, islumber.com. Much of the content used for the iSlumber library came from a book by Dr. James Moss of Cornell University called Power Sleep. It's a great book, but it covers such a wide range of sleep issues and sleep habits that it takes a while for you to dig through it to find the parts that match your particular sleep problem. So, we broke the book's content down into appropriate objects that allowed us to rebuild each individual's library based on the most relevant Power Sleep sections for them. Visitors can still see all of the material, but it's organized in the order that makes the most sense for each visitor based on their particular sleep issues. But relevance is only half the battle. We have to make sure the relevant content means something to the individual. For that, we want to create objects within the relevant objects based on the unique attributes of the message receiver. We refer to that as intimacy. Think of intimacy as spinning relevant content based on the individual's interests, lifestyle, attitudes, behavioral attributes, and personality to enhance that individual's comprehension, to make a connection with the prospect that makes the relevant content actionable for them based on their wants, needs, motivations, and barriers. For instance, in iSlumber, two visitors with similar sleeplessness issues can create very different action plans and receive very different support material based on subtle differences in attitudes and perceptions, different motivations and barriers, different levels of self-confidence, all sorts of things that have nothing to do with the recommendations, but everything to do with how the recommendations are positioned and worded. Because unless we can put the right content into the most appropriate context for each prospect, we can't get people to do what we would do in a given situation if they only knew what we knew about our brand and the product. We want them to love our stuff on their terms, which of course is the only way anyone can love stuff. If the prospect intellectually understands our product, and we can successfully